everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and it's time for part 2 of the Galaxy Gear review. This is more or less an update video on things that I did not have a chance before to fully check out yet. To start off with, I am now hearing more news about compatibility updates. I am now seeing Galaxy S4 updates roll out for this guy, so hopefully if you have the Galaxy S4, you will be able to use the Galaxy Gear soon. There should also be updates rolling out for the Galaxy Note 2 and also Galaxy S3. I hope to hear about updates for other devices as well soon. I made a video last week talking about the Galaxy Gear and what type of hardware it has inside of it and what it's actually capable of. This guy is kind of like a Galaxy S2. It's got an Exynos 4212 SoC inside of it, 2 Cortex A9 cores clocked at 800 MHz, although when tested it looks like only one core is actually active at any time, so technically this seems like it's a single core device. It has a Mali 400 MP GPU, 512 megabytes of RAM and 4 gigabytes of internal storage. So for all intents and purposes, I feel like this is a small Galaxy S2 that's sitting on my wrist without the needed antennas, as this guy only has Bluetooth. So with all of this power, it's kind of sad that this guy doesn't have other antennas besides Bluetooth. By itself, this watch does not come with a keyboard, but I was able to actually install the AOSP keyboard, and after restarting the watch, you can see that I've got the keyboard fired up here, and this is just accurate enough to be able to type just about anything in without any problems. Keep in mind though that even though I have a keyboard working on here, Skype is not functional because there is no Bluetooth tethering, and even if we were to have Bluetooth tethering available, video streaming would be way too slow for something like this. Maybe voice calls would work, but I highly doubt video streaming. I've heard about some people over at XDA getting Tablet Talk to work on this device. That is essentially a paid app that lets you send SMS messages over Bluetooth to your phone. So just say that you have a tablet or a device that doesn't have internet connectivity, you can then sync with your phone and send SMS that way. You can see that Swipe actually works here, and some people are reporting good results. But I am not a fan of installing contraband apps or apps that are not paid for. My point in mentioning this is hoping that we get some developers that make applications that can sync SMS by Bluetooth to our phones, to our Galaxy Note 3s, or whatever Samsung device we choose to use with this guy, and be able to answer messages by simply just typing them out rather than having to use S-Voice. S-Voice does work pretty well though. There we go, you see it actually recognizes what I said without error. It does have errors here and there once in a while, but I think if you speak clearly and loudly that it doesn't have much of a problem, and it's actually pretty practical. Oop, I don't know what it just did. Okay, I'm done with you. Be quiet. Be quiet. So as I showed you with Skype, even though it's non-functional, I have been able to sideload applications. You do that by putting this guy inside of the little cradle dock. You plug it into your computer, you need to go into Settings, go under Gear Info, make sure that US Debug is checked. Then when this is plugged into your computer, you can use ADB install to sideload applications. I was also able to install applications like Wondershare MobileGo, which I was able to get a free 15-day trial on Windows 4. Basically, instead of using ADB install or ADB push, you can use MobileGo to install applications instead. But since we don't have internet connectivity except for just Bluetooth, you can see that applications like the Google Play Store are just simply going to crash. They're not going to load at all. But of course I had to put it on here just for kicks to see what it does. With that Mali 400 MP processor, you can see that I am able to play things like World of Goo that I have sideloaded very easily. But you can see that the orientation here isn't very practical. I would have to take the watch off my wrist for several different games just in order to play it. Here we have Fertiburb as well, my little friendly alien. I think the point here is showing you what this can do rather than actually practically playing all these things. You can see here that I also have Nova Launcher, and the question would be, can we get this to look skinned like a real Android device? You can see here that you can scroll through all the different home screens, and I do have some widgets here. But all of the pre-installed clock widgets that they have inside of this guy do not work. So just say that I was to drag and drop the pedometer clock, you're going to see it says app isn't installed. So you are very limited in what you can do with widgets. But you can drag and drop apps onto your home screens. Also, you notice that there is no way to access recent applications. Actually, there are some shortcuts that you can access. Just say I was to hold down with 2 fingers. You can see that that brings up your recent applications. And actually, just to make a point, let's go all the way backward. I didn't set Nova Launcher as the default launcher, so it goes right back to the Galaxy Gear TouchWiz theme. You can do the exact same thing under here. It had nothing to do with Nova Launcher. Just take 2 fingers, hold downward, and then you have recent apps. So you'll notice in day-to-day use that once this times out, it goes right back to the clock screen and you have to go back underneath applications and fire up the application again. But you do have the option of holding downward in order to access recent applications, so it's not that bad. The other thing that you can do is double tap with 2 fingers and it brings you to the shortcut in order to turn up system volume or down system volume. And you can also adjust the brightness of the screen to outdoor mode or down lower to conserve power. Keep in mind also that the outdoor mode only stays on for a few minutes, so don't panic. It's not something that's going to be able to fully waste your battery because it doesn't stay on for very long. So as an actual Android device with everything that I have showed you, I would practically call this about 70% functional as an Android device. Not having other antennas besides Bluetooth is really going to be its killjoy. So how about some other functions that make this a nearly functioning Galaxy Android device? Well, we've also got the speaker on here. It's got a Yamaha DAC, and actually I think that the speaker sounds pretty good for what it is. I'm surprised at how loud it can get. That's especially useful during phone calls since there is no way to take this off of speakerphone mode. Call quality was actually pretty clear to me. Unless you are really far away from your Android device, I think that the quality is pretty surprising, and I have used this a lot, actually, to answer phone calls and also to dial out. I haven't had any trouble with hearing phone calls through this, and people who are talking to me when I am speaking through this as a handset don't have any trouble hearing me either. That one downside is that it is just speakerphone. There is no place to plug in a headset if you want to keep it private, so in those types of circumstances I would probably just pull my phone out of my pocket instead of using this. Now, of course, probably the most important thing here is what about battery life? Samsung says that this is supposed to last a full day, about 24-25 hours. Now for me, depending on how many messages I'm getting during the day, I'm either able to get a full day or a little bit more than a full day, so I was happy to see that I'm not having this guy die too quickly. Now, of course, if you're going to be installing a bunch of applications and playing them on here, there's only a 315 milliamp hour battery, which is really tiny compared to phones like the Galaxy Note 3 that has a 3200 milliamp hour battery. 315 milliamps is absolutely nothing in comparison. So if you are actually committing to play a bunch of games on this guy, since it does have an actually pretty decent GPU inside of it, your battery ain't gonna last through the day. But if you use this as intended, just making some phone calls and checking the time, or even just using this as a pedometer or receiving messages, you should last through the day. Also, there have been some days where I haven't connected it to my phone at all. I just used it as a watch, basically, and it can last a few days, it seems, when you don't have it actually connected to the phone doing anything. Because for me, if I'm not using it with the phone, I can still use things like the pedometer and then sync it with my phone later on, and I can also use the camera and play games on it. Ooh, and also, as we're seeing here, once it hits 5%, if I double tap and I try to turn up the brightness, it's just going to ignore all of that and it's going to stay at the dimmest possible. So keep that in mind. Once it hits 5%, it's basically unusable and you need to start recharging it. So I had a chance just now to charge this to try to see how long it takes to charge. It was at 5% when I put it on the charger. I charged it for 10 minutes and you can see now it says 15%, which means it roughly charges at about 1% a minute. It'll take about 100 minutes then to fully charge, or about an hour and 40 minutes. For a 315 milliamp hour battery, that's quite a bit of time to charge fully, but that seems to be the reality of it. Now moving on to the pedometer, like I was talking about just a moment ago, there are a lot of pretty nifty things in here. You see that you have walk workout. It says helps you walk at a speed required to burn fat. The longer you maintain the speed, the more effectively you will burn calories. And then you can exit out and we can go underneath the step counter, which is just the basic pedometer. Step count says view the number of steps you can take each day here. Send step count data to Exercise Mate feature in S-Health on Galaxy mobile devices. Now this is something that I really liked this device for because I don't need to have the phone when I go out running. I don't need to have the phone when I'm on the treadmill. It will record everything and then later I can sync it with my phone. And then when we go to the right, we see that we have S-Trainer. That is all that's there, so there's 3 different modes. Now for S-Trainer, it's interval training, a combination of walking, fast walking, and running to improve your fitness. And then it gives you all the parameters for the intervals. What I've noticed with this pedometer though, compared to something like Fitbit or other pedometers that people really love, that this guy tends to way overestimate how many steps that you're actually taking. I'm hoping with an update that I can see better accuracy here, but what this guy does is that it doesn't start counting your steps until 3 seconds after it detects movement, and sometimes it detects things that really shouldn't be counted as steps. So when comparing it to something like a Fitbit, people have said that it's quite a bit off. So for me, it really spoils the whole pedometer experience, because if the step count isn't even correct, how can you possibly try to use it as a gauge for your overall workout? So I'm not saying very much for the pedometer for now. Also, if you're somebody who's going to be keeping it on your wrist and keeping the pedometer all the time just to see how many steps that you're actually accumulating throughout the day, as it's recommended that you take 10,000 steps a day. If you're moving your arm around, or if you're keeping it on a wrist where you're constantly moving that wrist around, it's going to be overestimating and overcounting as well. So if you do want to try using this, I would just keep it on pause if you're going to be just walking around doing things throughout the day, rather than trying to use it as a measure for how many steps you've taken. Please, Samsung, fix this. This could be quite cool if the pedometer was actually somewhat accurate. Now moving on to the camera, I want to show some pictures and also some videos. The pictures and videos are actually pretty decent for a teeny little watch. It's a 1.9 megapixel autofocus camera. Now the autofocus only works when inside of taking snapshots. Autofocus does not work at all during video. It seems to be a fixed focus. The only option that you have during video is choosing the size. Mostly, I think that this camera will be more or less useful for taking up-close pictures of documents. You have two different focus modes, autofocus and macro focus. Autofocus doesn't work at all well to take pictures up close of things, but the macro focus mode actually works quite well if you want to take pictures of documents, and this just happens to be what I think this is best at doing. One other thing about the camera is that when you take pictures, you always hear the sound of the camera taking pictures. There is no setting that I can find in order to turn it off. I do see some people going in and hacking it to get rid of the sound. If you're trying to be discreet, it's not so nice to be able to hear that all the time. If you're somebody who's not savvy with going in and editing things, I'd probably just hold my thumb over the speaker. And then at that point you can barely hear it. But that's kind of annoying. But still, for what it is and what it does, I give it some props, and I want to show you some examples, so let's go and check those out. Family! What? Now, in terms of using this around water, it's IP55 certified or water resistant. I myself have used it. I've washed my hands. It's gotten a little bit wet here and there, and nothing has happened to it. What people complain about, though, is sometimes they think that water gets through this hole here, and they see that the lens starts to fog up. Now, if the lens just fogs up, it seems that the water dries out and it's fine. But for others, I have heard actual complaints that water gets inside of here, and if that happens, game over. So some people have complained about fogging or misting if they go out for a run and their wrist gets really sweaty or their arm gets really sweaty. Some people will wear a wristband around their wrist and then put the watch on top of it. I really think that Samsung should have gone along with what Sony did to make this waterproof rather than just simply water resistant. If you see this happening to the camera, I would honestly just take it back to the store that you got it from and exchange it, as water should not be getting into here. So overall, keep in mind that this is very mildly water resistant. If it gets a little drops on it here and there from the rain, I don't think it's going to hurt it, but do not submerge this. So overall, I love this little watch. This is something that I want to use for quite some time. I absolutely love making phone calls and answering phone calls on here. I do like that when I'm bored, I can play the occasional game on this guy without having to take my phone out of my pocket. Yes, gaming on this is not something that's practical. It just feels like, yay, I can do something with this. And I'm hoping that with all this power that I am showing people with this, that there are some developers who take the initiative to make some pretty useful apps. Like I mentioned, this thing is like a 70% functional Galaxy S2. I'm really hoping that someone figures out how to get Bluetooth tether working so that we can connect to the internet. You saw that we can actually get a keyboard functioning. I'm also seeing that some people are able to get applications that sync via Bluetooth their messages. That way they can actually be sent through something like your Galaxy Note 3. So I see this as the future. I see this as being quite functional. And for me, a watch like this just makes it so I don't have to be taking my phone out all the time in order to check my messages. I think overall it's helped to keep me less distracted, especially if you're in an environment where using your phone is forbidden. So my end remarks are, yes, this is a really nice little watch. I love all the colors that it comes in. I don't even mind that it's bulky because it is very functional. But still, at $300, I think this is incredibly expensive. I'm really hoping to see the price drop on this device. For me, I would probably pay $200. I really would not like to pay $300 unless I was somebody who just had a bunch of money to throw around. But the overall experience of using this with my Galaxy Note 3 has really enriched the experience of owning that device overall. So this has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. I do think this is a great little product. So if you have the ability to, I recommend checking it out. Have a good day, you guys!